December 6, 1941, Japan. Somewhere deep within the Imperial Navy headquarters. The atmosphere is thick with the odour of burning tobacco and the sharp sound of men speaking in low, confident tones. In a small, dimly lit conference room, Japanese officers gather around a large wooden table, the glint of sunlight streaming through heavy curtains. The war room hums with the low buzz of nervous energy, but the mood remains confident, perhaps overly so. The officers know they are on the verge of something monumental. The attack on Pearl Harbor is already in the planning stages. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the plan, listens carefully to his subordinates' reports on the growing tensions with the United States. They all speak of one thing: America's perceived weakness. They laugh at the outdated American battleships, some of which are stationed at Pearl Harbor. Among these, the USS Arizona stands out, her sleek hull and proud turrets now reduced to the role of a relic of the past. Their ships are nothing more than floating museums, one officer scoffs, his voice dripping with contempt. Old, rusty, and obsolete, they'll never stand a chance against our modern fleet. The laughter fills the room as the men exchange looks of superiority. It is a strange kind of arrogance, one that blinds them to the consequences of their own planning. Pearl Harbor, they believe, is just a small dot on the map, a place where the Americans have become complacent, too comfortable in their power to notice the storm gathering on the horizon. They are about to learn, to their horror, how wrong they are. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The morning breaks with the soft sound of birds and the rhythmic lapping of waves against the shores of Oahu. It is an ordinary Sunday, or so it seems. American sailors and soldiers move lazily about the harbor, unaware of the impending disaster. The sun casts a warm glow over the Pacific as the sound of the morning reveille calls the men to attention. On the USS Arizona, sailors mill about, performing routine maintenance and settling into their roles for the day. No one anticipates the storm that is about to hit them. As the crew of the Arizona stands unaware, high above them in the cold, clear skies, Japanese pilots prepare for a strike that will change everything. Lieutenant Commander Mitsuo Fuchida's voice crackles over the radio to his comrades, signaling the beginning of Operation Z. The Americans believe they are safe, protected by their massive ocean borders. They laugh at the thought of an attack, especially one from the Empire of Japan. The idea is too far-fetched. The Arizona is nothing but an antique. How could this rusted behemoth possibly stand against Japan's modern, nimble aircraft? December 7th, 1941, 7:48 a.m., Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. A sudden, unmistakable rumble shakes the ground. The sound is distant at first, like thunder. No one thinks much of it, but then it grows louder, closer, like a growing storm. A piercing roar cuts through the serene morning air, and with a spine-chilling crack, the sky is split open by the sound of propellers, the distinct hum of Japanese aircraft. Without warning, the horizon is painted with the dark, menacing silhouettes of 353 Japanese planes, descending from the sky like an unstoppable force. The men aboard the USS Arizona barely have time to react. They stand frozen for a moment, blinking in disbelief as the first bombs fall, ripping through the tranquility of their morning. The first bomb hits the USS shore. The explosion rocks the entire harbor, sending massive plumes of smoke into the air. Within seconds, chaos erupts. "Incoming!" a voice screams from the deck. The Arizona's crew springs into action, running to their stations, but it's too late. The full force of the attack is upon them. The first bomb to strike the USS Arizona is a 1,760-pound armor-piercing projectile dropped by Lieutenant Fuchida's Onaichi D-3A dive bomber. It hits the forward magazine, a part of the ship's armament storage. The impact is catastrophic. There is no warning, no time to brace. It's as if the ship explodes from within. The blast hurls men across the deck, some disintegrating in the fury of the blast, others tossed into the air like ragdolls. The force of the explosion sends massive shockwaves rippling through the hull, ripping the ship apart from the inside out. The air is filled with smoke, the acrid scent of burning fuel and metal filling the lungs of the survivors. The Arizona shudders, her guns still eerily silent, unable to return fire. She is a victim of her own design. Her armor, once considered indestructible, is now her doom. "The ship is sinking," a sailor yells, his voice a desperate scream. But it is too late. The Arizona, a symbol of American power just hours before, is being torn apart in real time. On deck, men struggle to stay afloat in the rising floodwaters. Some cling to the remains of broken equipment, others try to patch up the damage, but the battle is lost. As the waters surge through the Arizona's hull, it becomes clear that the ship is beyond saving. She is a crumpled ruin, consumed by fire and explosion. The once mighty vessel is now little more than a hulk of twisted steel, sinking slowly into the Pacific. Meanwhile, on the other side of Pearl Harbor, the Japanese dive bombers swoop down, strafing the water, their bombs finding their marks. The harbor is a picture of hell on earth, with explosions blooming like deadly flowers, spreading fire, chaos, and death. The USS Oklahoma capsizes, another proud American ship torn apart. On the Arizona, Captain Franklin van Valkenburg, his uniform singed and burnt, remains at the helm. Despite the devastation, he gives orders, attempting to save the ship and his crew. His voice is calm, authoritative, but there is a desperate edge in it now. He knows the Arizona will never survive this. His final act is one of bravery, as he stays aboard, ensuring the crew evacuates as best they can. But it's all futile. The ship is doomed. A few moments later, Captain van Valkenburg's voice is silenced forever. December 7th, 1941, 8:10 a.m., Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. As the USS Arizona begins to sink beneath the churning waves, the once proud battleship is now a symbol of American vulnerability. The fiery inferno that consumes the ship casts an eerie glow over the entire harbor. Thick black smoke billows upward, a suffocating curtain that blurs the once clear sky. The sound of burning metal and the crackling of flames reverberate through the area, echoing across the water. The Arizona is no longer just a ship. She is a tomb, taking with her the lives of over 100 men. Those who survived the initial blast and fire scramble for survival in the chaos that follows. Some manage to escape into the water, desperately swimming toward nearby vessels, while others are left behind, trapped by the wreckage or swallowed by the flames. Every movement feels futile, as the powerful, unexpected assault has left them overwhelmed, without hope of immediate rescue. As the Arizona continues to settle into the waters of Pearl Harbor, the devastation is far from over. Sailors from nearby ships rush to help, but the sight of the sinking battleship serves as a grim reminder of the true scale of the attack. The pride of the American fleet, once thought to be invulnerable, is now reduced to a burning wreck. It is not just the loss of the Arizona that shakes the men who witness it. It is the realization that they are not invincible, that their adversary has struck in a way that no one could have predicted. Meanwhile, high above in the Japanese command center, the officers who had so confidently mocked the American fleet just the day before now witness the success of their plan. Admiral Yamamoto, though satisfied by the tactical brilliance of the attack, remains deeply aware of the larger consequences of what has just transpired. "We have awoken a sleeping giant," he says, his voice heavy with a mix of triumph and foreboding. He knows that this destruction, this humiliation of the United States, has set into motion a chain of events that will eventually lead to far more than just a naval battle. Back at Pearl Harbor, however, the full weight of the consequences has not yet sunk in. As the hours stretch on, the harbor becomes an image of death and destruction. Fires burn unchecked, ships sink, and the wounded are carried away, some in shock, others calling out for help. The dockyards, once filled with the sounds of maintenance and order, are now littered with debris and the remains of men and ships alike. On the USS West Virginia, a nearby battleship that was also struck during the attack, the crew fights to prevent their own vessel from sinking. There is no time to mourn the loss of the Arizona. There is only the urgency of survival. The men are working with desperate efficiency, pulling together to save their ships knowing full well that the world has just changed forever. It is a tragic moment of reckoning. The USS Arizona, once the centerpiece of the Pacific Fleet, is now a sunken monument to America's unpreparedness. In the wake of her destruction, the American military realizes that they have been caught off guard, an entire fleet crippled in a single, devastating strike. And yet this attack, horrific as it is, will ultimately serve as the catalyst for the awakening of American power. December 7th, 1941, 9:00 a.m., Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The destruction of the USS Arizona is not the end. It is only the beginning of the brutal reality that has unfolded across Pearl Harbor. As the survivors of the attack regroup, the scale of the devastation becomes painfully clear. The men who had once laughed at the notion of such an attack now find themselves facing the full force of what it means to be caught off guard. The air is thick with smoke and confusion, the distant wail of sirens blending with the screams of the wounded. Admiral Husband Kimmel, the commander of the Pacific Fleet, stands at the helm of the command center, his face drawn and pale. His thoughts race, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the attack. This was not just a strike on a few ships. It was a targeted, calculated assault on the very heart of the Pacific Fleet. His voice, when he speaks, is strained but calm. This was no accident, gentlemen. This was an act of war. The men around him are in shock, but there is no time for disbelief. Reports pour in from every corner of the harbor. Ships down, aircraft destroyed, men lost. The Arizona, the pride of the fleet, lies in ruins. So too do the USS Oklahoma, USS West Virginia, and USS Nevada. The devastation stretches across the harbor like a jagged wound, each ship sunk or heavily damaged, with only the faintest glimmer of hope left. This was no mere exercise in naval combat. It was a calculated, devastating attack that has shattered the American Navy's presence in the Pacific. In the command center, a quiet, terrible realization dawns. Pearl Harbor is no longer a symbol of strength. It is a symbol of vulnerability. Back on the Arizona, those who survived the initial attack now face the harrowing task of rescue. The men who are still able to move gather in small groups, dragging their fellow sailors from the wreckage. The intense heat, the smoke, and the rising waters make every action feel like a battle against nature itself. But their efforts are not in vain. Some manage to escape the burning ship and make their way to safety, though the toll is steep. One survivor, Seaman First Class Philip McGonigal, recounts the horrors of the ship's final moments. It was like a giant hand had picked us up and slammed us down into the water. The blast threw us all over the place. Everything burned, everything broke. Despite the horror that surrounds him, McGonigal's voice is steady. It is this unwavering resolve, shared by so many of the survivors, that will become the backbone of the American response to the attack. Across the Pacific, news of the attack spreads quickly. The Japanese have woken a sleeping giant, and now the world must brace for the aftermath. Within hours of the attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt is informed of the devastation. As he listens to the reports, his face hardens. The decision is already made. Roosevelt knows, as does everyone in the room, that war is now inevitable. The only question left is how America will respond. On the floor of Congress, a speech is being prepared. It will be delivered by Roosevelt the following day, marking a pivotal moment in world history. The words are simple, but they carry the weight of the nation's resolve. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The time for uncertainty has passed. America will not sit idly by. They will fight. They will avenge the destruction of Pearl Harbor, the loss of the Arizona, and the thousands of lives torn apart by this sudden violent betrayal. The Japanese officers, who had once mocked the Arizona as outdated, will come to realize too late the full scope of their mistake. The United States will not retreat. The destruction of Pearl Harbor will ignite a firestorm of American fury that will sweep across the Pacific, and the world will change forever. December 8th, 1941, Washington, D.C. The day after the attack, the United States government is in full mobilization. President Franklin D. Roosevelt stands before Congress, his voice resolute, as he delivers the speech that will forever be etched in history. The chamber is packed with lawmakers, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and determination. Roosevelt's words are firm, and as he utters the famous line, "A date which will live in infamy," the room erupts in a surge of emotion, applause, shouts, and the stamping of feet. It is a call to arms that will rally the entire nation. In Roosevelt's voice, there is no doubt, there is no hesitation. We will not let this attack go unanswered. We will fight back, not just for ourselves, but for our allies and for the future of the world. The nation, still reeling from the attack on Pearl Harbor, is now thrust into a new era of war. The American people, many of whom had believed in isolationism and remained detached from the growing conflict in Europe and Asia, are now united in their fury. The attack has brought them together, and the United States will no longer remain on the sidelines. As Roosevelt speaks, American military forces are already preparing for retaliation. The immediate response is swift. Planes take to the skies, and ships begin to deploy across the Pacific. But while the military gears up for the coming conflict, another, perhaps more unexpected, response is being shaped. This war, unlike any before it, will not just be fought on the battlefield. It will be fought in the hearts and minds of the American public. December 8, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. On the ground in Hawaii, the first wave of disbelief has passed, and now the process of rebuilding and retaliation begins. Survivors of the USS Arizona, along with the other ships that were struck during the attack, gather at what remains of their naval base. They stand together, silently surveying the damage. But beneath the surface, there is a palpable sense of resolve. The men who survived have become part of something larger than themselves. They are part of a moment in history that will be remembered forever. Chief Petty Officer Joseph George, who had been on the Arizona when the bombs fell, recalls how, in the midst of the chaos, his thoughts turned to one thing. We're going to pay them back for this. This is not the end, it's just the beginning. George, like many of the other survivors, becomes a symbol of the unyielding spirit of the men who survived the horrors of that fateful day. They won't just rebuild, they will fight back, and they will do it with everything they have. The USS Arizona may have been destroyed, but her memory will fuel a wave of retaliation that will take the American military across the Pacific and beyond. December 11th, 1941, Washington, D.C. Just days after Roosevelt's speech, the United States is officially at war with Japan. The declaration of war is passed unanimously by Congress, and the world shifts on its axis. The Pearl Harbor attack has galvanized not just the American government, but the entire nation. Across the United States, there is no question about the path forward. America will fight, and they will fight hard. The American public, once divided over the idea of entering a foreign conflict, now rallies behind the war effort. Factories begin churning out war materials, men enlist in the armed forces, and the sense of unity is overwhelming. There is a palpable energy in the air, a sense that the United States is on the cusp of something monumental. The Pacific War is about to begin in earnest. In the skies over Pearl Harbor, the destruction of the Arizona serves as a stark reminder of what is at stake. Every pilot who takes to the skies in the coming months will carry with them the memory of that day, the sinking of the Arizona, and the hundreds of lives lost. Every sailor who boards a ship, every soldier who steps onto the battlefield, will do so with the knowledge that the attack on Pearl Harbor is a call to arms that cannot be ignored. For the men aboard the Arizona, and for the millions who would follow them into battle, there is no turning back now. The Pacific will become a crucible, a place where the world's greatest powers will clash, where strategies will be tested, and where the survival of nations will be determined. And for the Japanese, who mocked the might of the American fleet just days before, they will come to learn, too late, the price of underestimating their adversary. June 4th, 1942, Midway Atoll, the Pacific Ocean. The American fleet, still recovering from the brutal attack on Pearl Harbor, now finds itself preparing for a decisive confrontation with the Japanese forces. The Battle of Midway, a critical turning point in the Pacific War, is about to unfold. It is a battle of intelligence, strategy, and raw courage, a fight that will set the course for the future of the Pacific. Midway is a tiny speck in the vast Pacific Ocean, but it holds immense strategic value. The Japanese Imperial Navy, still riding high after their success at Pearl Harbor, is determined to take control of Midway Island. They believe that by capturing it, they will secure their dominance in the Pacific and force the United States to the negotiating table. But what the Japanese do not realize is that America has already begun to turn the tide. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, the commander of the United States Pacific Fleet, has seen the devastation of Pearl Harbor firsthand. He knows the stakes. This is not just a battle for Midway, it is a battle for the very survival of the United States in the Pacific. With limited resources and a fleet still reeling from the damage at Pearl Harbor, Nimitz puts his faith in intelligence. The United States has cracked the Japanese codes and knows exactly when and where the attack on Midway will come. As the Japanese fleet approaches, the American forces prepare in secret. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, known for his daring raid on Tokyo just months earlier, is ready to lead his bombers on a final, decisive mission. But it is the carriers, their aircraft poised for battle, that will play the pivotal role in the outcome of Midway. The battle begins with a devastating wave of Japanese bombers attacking Midway Island, but the Japanese forces, overconfident from their previous victories, fail to recognize the American trap. The United States, knowing the attack is coming, has already positioned its aircraft, ready to strike at the heart of the Japanese fleet. As the Japanese planes dive toward Midway, American fighters take to the air. The sound of roaring engines fills the sky as the two sides engage in a brutal aerial battle. For hours, the skies over Midway are filled with smoke, tracers, and the sound of machine gun fire. The stakes could not be higher. If the Americans lose here, the Japanese will control the Pacific, and the United States will be forced to fight on their heels. At the same time, below the surface, American submarines and destroyers are hunting the Japanese fleet. The tension is palpable, every move crucial. It is a game of cat and mouse, with both sides playing their cards carefully. The Japanese fleet, once so confident in its strength, begins to falter under the weight of American resolve. Admiral Yamamoto, the Japanese commander who had masterminded the attack on Pearl Harbor, watches as his fleet begins to take hits. His plans are unraveling before his eyes. The American pilots, many of whom are still haunted by the destruction of Pearl Harbor, fight with a ferocity that the Japanese cannot match. As the day unfolds, the Japanese are forced into retreat, leaving behind a fleet that is broken and battered. In the chaos of the battle, the tide turns decisively in favor of the Americans. The USS Yorktown, despite being severely damaged, continues to fight, launching wave after wave of bombers against the Japanese carriers. The American planes, though outnumbered and outgunned, find their targets, striking the Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, which are set ablaze and eventually sink. The destruction of these carriers marks the turning point of the Pacific War. The Japanese Navy, once seemingly invincible, has lost its offensive capability. Their pride and overconfidence have cost them dearly. The battle, which began as a desperate struggle for survival, has become a resounding American victory. As the smoke clears over Midway, the world begins to understand that the Japanese Empire, though still a formidable force, has been dealt a blow from which it will never fully recover. The loss of the Arizona and the subsequent victories at Midway are two sides of the same coin, one a symbol of vulnerability, the other a testament to resilience and the unyielding will of the American people. August 1942, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. In the aftermath of Midway, the United States and its allies begin the slow, grueling process of retaking the Pacific from the Japanese. It will not be easy. The next phase of the war demands sacrifices that will stretch the limits of human endurance and courage. The battle for Guadalcanal is the next great trial, and it will test both the strength and resolve of the American military. Guadalcanal, a jungle-covered island in the Solomon Islands chain, is a strategic prize. The Japanese, who have already established a strong presence in the Pacific, use the island as a key point in their effort to control the region. If the Americans can seize Guadalcanal, they will establish a base from which they can launch further operations to cripple Japanese supply lines and bring the war closer to Japan's doorstep. But this will not be a quick fight. In the humid heat of Guadalcanal, the men of the 1st Marine Division, led by Major General Alexander Vandergrift, are already ashore. They land with the certainty that they will face fierce resistance. As the first waves of Marines hit the beaches, they are greeted not by the jubilant resistance of a nation's defenders, but by the brutal ferocity of Japanese troops who refuse to surrender their ground. The jungle is thick, the heat stifling, and the terrain treacherous. The Marines are forced to fight inch by inch, pushing forward through swamps and dense undergrowth. The Japanese, in turn, use the jungle to their advantage, slipping between trees and vines, firing at the Americans from concealed positions. Every movement feels like an ambush. For weeks, the fighting continues without relent. The Marines advance on the airfield that the Japanese are constructing, knowing that securing this base is vital for the success of the Allied campaign in the Pacific. But the Japanese forces, under the command of General Harukichi Hyakutake, refuse to give up the island easily. Guadalcanal becomes a brutal battle of attrition, with both sides suffering tremendous casualties. Private First Class John Basilone, a Marine from New Jersey, finds himself at the heart of the fighting. Basilone, already a decorated hero from the Battle of Guadalcanal, is called upon to hold a key position during a night assault. Despite being outnumbered and surrounded, Basilone holds his ground with incredible bravery. Using machine gun fire, he repels wave after wave of Japanese attackers, saving countless lives in the process. His courage in the face of certain death becomes the stuff of legend, and for his actions, he is awarded the Medal of Honor. But even heroes like Basilone cannot halt the tide of suffering. By the end of the campaign, over 1,600 Americans have been killed, with more than 4,000 wounded. On the Japanese side, the casualties are even higher. The battle is a nightmare of heat, disease, and constant bombardment. The airfields are bombed relentlessly by American aircraft, and the Japanese supply lines are stretched thin. The Marines, though weary and covered in mud, refuse to yield. Every inch of Guadalcanal is a hard-won victory. In the skies above, American pilots, many still carrying the memories of Pearl Harbor, join the battle. The Battle of the Eastern Solomons sees American planes launching strikes against Japanese ships and airfields. The Japanese fleet, though formidable, is now showing signs of wear and tear from the combined attacks by American forces. The tide of the Pacific War is turning. Guadalcanal marks a major turning point in the island-hopping strategy that will eventually lead to Japan's doorstep. However, the cost is staggering. The American military, though successful in their push, has been bled dry in the process. Their triumphs come at a price that they will continue to pay throughout the rest of the war. But what Guadalcanal offers is hope. The victory is a demonstration of what American resolve can achieve, a lesson learned from the rubble of Pearl Harbor and the remains of the USS Arizona. It is the moment when the United States proves that it will fight to reclaim the Pacific, no matter the cost. For the men who fought in the jungles of Guadalcanal, the memory of their fallen comrades, their families, and the promise of revenge for Pearl Harbor will drive them forward. And in the quiet moments of reflection, as they gaze at the horizon or listen to the sound of the Pacific waves, they understand that they are not only fighting for victory, they are fighting for the soul of a nation that had been broken but would never be defeated. November 1943, Tarawa Atoll, Gilbert Islands. The success at Guadalcanal has set the stage for the next phase of the war in the Pacific, the island-hopping campaign. The Americans are no longer content to sit back. With the fall of Guadalcanal, the Allied forces begin to push further westward, aiming to seize key islands and establish air bases that can reach the heart of the Japanese Empire. Tarawa, located in the Gilbert Islands, is next on the list. The Japanese have fortified the island, and they are prepared to fight to the bitter end. Tarawa is tiny, just over 2 square miles, but it is a crucial stepping stone to the Marianas and beyond. Its capture will allow the Americans to launch bombing raids on the Japanese home islands, bringing the war closer to Tokyo. But the island is heavily defended, and the Japanese, under the command of Major General Ichiji Sugita, have created a labyrinth of bunkers, pillboxes, and machine gun nests that will make any assault deadly. The US Marine Corps launches the assault on November the 20th, 1943, with the 1st Marine Division leading the charge. The battle begins at dawn as the Marines, supported by naval bombardments, storm the beaches. But the Japanese defenders, entrenched in the coral and earth, are ready for them. The naval bombardment, intended to soften up the enemy, is less effective than hoped. The Japanese fortifications are built deep into the island, and many of the Marines' landing craft are blown out of the water before they even reach the shore. The landing at Tarawa is a brutal, bloody affair. The Marines are met with a wall of machine gun fire, and as they push forward through the sand and water, they are mowed down by Japanese defenders hidden in bunkers just out of sight. The air is thick with smoke, the stench of blood and death mingling with the saltwater breeze. Men die where they stand, cut down before they even reach cover. One of the first to hit the beach is Sergeant John Basilone, a hero from Guadalcanal who had earned the Medal of Honor for his bravery in the earlier campaign. Now, he faces the same kind of battle, but the cost is far higher. As he pushes forward with his fellow Marines, he is struck down by Japanese machine gun fire, sacrificing his life for the cause. His death is a somber moment, reminding the men around him that war is never easy, and even the greatest heroes are not immune to its horrors. The fighting at Tarawa becomes a desperate struggle for survival. The Marines are forced to advance slowly, taking ground inch by inch, facing obstacles both man-made and natural. The island's coral reef prevents the landing craft from reaching the shore, forcing many Marines to wade through waist-deep water while under fire. The beach becomes a killing zone, littered with the bodies of the fallen, both American and Japanese. The Marines continue their assault, determined to press on despite the staggering losses. By November 23rd, after 3 days of relentless combat, the Marines finally secure the island, but it comes at a staggering cost. Over 1,000 American casualties and an unknown number of Japanese defenders who fought to the death. The battle is a sobering reminder of the price of victory in the Pacific. The Japanese have not given up their ground easily, and the island is now littered with the wreckage of both sides, from bombed-out bunkers to the twisted remains of tanks and aircraft. For the American forces, the victory at Tarawa is a necessary one, but it is bittersweet. They have secured an important base, but at a high price. Tarawa's brutal fighting exemplifies the intensity of the war in the Pacific. No ground is easily won, and the American soldiers must face both fierce resistance and the harsh conditions of the Pacific Islands. But Tarawa also marks a turning point. The United States has learned valuable lessons about amphibious warfare, and as the war continues, the American forces will refine their tactics, learning how to better prepare for the bloody battles to come. They will face similar island battles in places like Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. But with each victory, they move closer to Japan itself. The memory of Pearl Harbor and the lost battleships, especially the Arizona, lingers in the hearts of those who fight in the Pacific. Each battle fought, each island taken, is a step closer to the ultimate goal: the defeat of Japan and the end of the war. The pain of losing the Arizona will never fully fade, but the Americans will make sure that the cost of that loss will be repaid in full. February 19th, 1945, Iwo Jima, Pacific Ocean. By the time the Americans approached the shores of Iwo Jima in 1945, the war in the Pacific has reached its crescendo. The United States is no longer simply fighting for survival, it is on the verge of victory. After years of hard-fought battles in places like Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and the Philippines, The American forces now turn their attention to the final, brutal push toward Japan. Iwo Jima, a small island located halfway between Japan and the Mariana Islands, stands as a final obstacle. The island is strategically vital. Its airfields will serve as staging grounds for American bombers preparing for the final assault on Japan. But the Japanese defenders, led by General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, are well prepared for the inevitable assault. The Japanese have fortified Iwo Jima with miles of tunnels, hidden artillery positions, and well-defended pillboxes. The defenders know they will not survive this battle, but they are determined to make the Americans pay dearly for every inch of ground they gain. The assault on Iwo Jima begins with an intense naval and aerial bombardment. For days, American ships and planes pound the island, trying to soften up the defences. The bombers drop thousands of tons of explosives, and the roar of artillery shakes the Pacific sky. But despite the ferocity of the bombardment, the Japanese positions remain largely intact. They are hidden in the island's jagged volcanic terrain, safe from the bombing. On February 19th, the Marines of the US 4th and 5th Marine Divisions hit the beaches. As the landing crafts touch the shore, the Marines are greeted not by the relative ease they had come to expect in earlier campaigns, but by a hellscape of machine gun fire, mortar shells, and the staccato bursts of Japanese rifles. The Marines charge forward, stepping over the bodies of their fallen comrades, unwilling to stop. The air is thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the stench of burning flesh. Despite the overwhelming artillery support, the Marines find themselves locked in a deadly stalemate with the entrenched Japanese defenders. Iwo Jima is not like the other islands they fought on. It is no longer just an island with enemy troops. It is a labyrinth, with hidden positions in every cave, every hill, and every crevice. The Japanese seem to be everywhere. The ground is not the only enemy. The black volcanic ash that coats the island makes every step a grueling slow-motion battle, adding to the Marines' exhaustion. Private First Class Ira Hayes, one of the soldiers who will later be immortalized in the famous photograph of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi, is part of the assault force. Hayes, a member of the Pima Indian tribe, feels the weight of his heritage on his shoulders as he steps onto the black sands of Iwo Jima. As his unit moves forward, they encounter brutal resistance. Waves of Japanese soldiers appear seemingly out of nowhere, opening fire from hidden positions in the island's rugged hills. Every Marine who advances is under constant threat of ambush. Casualties mount quickly, and the Marines are forced to fight for every inch of ground. On the 23rd of February, after days of relentless combat, the Marines reach the summit of Mount Suribachi, the highest point on the island. From this vantage point, the Marines have a clear view of the battle below, the smoke, the explosions, and the flashes of gunfire. It is here that one of the most iconic images of World War II is captured. The photograph, taken by Joe Rosenthal of the Associated Press, shows 6 Marines raising the American flag atop Mount Suribachi. The image becomes a symbol of American perseverance and unity, a moment of hope amidst the darkness of war. But while the flag raising is celebrated back home, it is far from the end of the battle. The Japanese still hold strong positions in the island's interior, and the fighting rages on. The battle for Iwo Jima is brutal, and it will not be easily won. As the days stretch into weeks, the Marines are bogged down in a relentless fight. The Japanese defenders, who have no hope of winning, fight with a ferocity that shocks even the battle-hardened Americans. The Marines face heavy casualties, and the island becomes a symbol of the savage cost of war. By the end of the battle, on March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima is secured, but at a staggering cost. Over 600 to 800 American Marines are killed, and more than 19,000 are wounded. The Japanese lose over 20,000 soldiers, nearly the entire defending force. Iwo Jima becomes one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War, and the price of the victory weighs heavily on the men who fought for it. The flag raising on Suribachi, though forever captured in the iconic photograph, represents not just the victory, but the unrelenting spirit of the United States military in the face of unimaginable odds. For those who fought on that island, the memory of Iwo Jima will never fade. It will always serve as a reminder of the sacrifice made in the pursuit of victory, a sacrifice that would ultimately lead to the end of the war. As the smoke clears over Iwo Jima, the road to Tokyo is now clear. The United States is closer than ever to bringing the war to Japan's doorstep. The final chapters of the Pacific War are yet to be written, but with each battle, each sacrifice, the American military is one step closer to achieving their goal. The final push, Okinawa. April 1st, 1945, Okinawa, Japan. The battle for Iwo Jima was a brutal prelude, but it was only the beginning of the final chapter in the Pacific War. The next island on the list is Okinawa, the last major barrier before the United States can strike the Japanese home islands. Situated just 340 miles south of Japan, Okinawa is strategically crucial for the Allies. Its capture will provide the Americans with the air bases necessary for launching the final invasion of Japan. But the Japanese have learned from their previous defeats. They will not give up Okinawa easily. This is their last stand before the homeland itself, and they know it. General Mitsuru Ushijima, the commander of the Japanese Defense Forces on Okinawa, has been ordered by his superiors to fight to the death. There will be no surrender. There will be no retreat. The island's terrain, rugged and hilly, gives the Japanese defenders an advantage, allowing them to dig in and prepare for the most intense battle of the Pacific. On the American side, the assault on Okinawa begins with a massive naval bombardment. The sky is filled with the roar of airplanes as thousands of American planes rain bombs on the island, attempting to weaken the Japanese defenses. The American fleet, led by Admiral Raymond Spruance, stands at the ready, launching attacks from the safety of the sea. But the Japanese soldiers, hidden in the caves and hills of Okinawa, remain largely unharmed. The bombardment proves to be less effective than expected. As the Americans begin their amphibious landing on April 1st, they are greeted by ferocious resistance. The beaches of Okinawa are littered with barbed wire, mines, and concrete bunkers. The first waves of Marines hit the shore, but they face an onslaught of gunfire from entrenched Japanese positions. The island's natural terrain, with its caves and ravines, allows the Japanese to strike at the Americans from unexpected angles. The fighting is intense, and the men of the US 10th Army, led by Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner, are forced to fight their way through a maze of hidden defenses. The battle is an agonizing grind, with the Marines and soldiers advancing slowly, pushing through thick jungles, exposed cliffs, and narrow ravines. It feels as though every inch of ground is contested. The Japanese soldiers are well prepared, and their tactics are designed to wear down the Americans, drawing them into close combat, where the Japanese can exploit their knowledge of the land. The Americans are forced to engage in house-to-house fighting, rooting out snipers and enemy troops hiding in the caves. The island's defenders are not just soldiers, they are fanatical fighters, determined to hold their ground until the bitter end. One of the most horrifying aspects of the battle for Okinawa is the widespread use of kamikaze attacks by the Japanese. Pilots, knowing they are facing certain death, dive their planes into American ships with explosive intent. These attacks come in waves, and the American Navy takes heavy losses as the kamikaze pilots target the fleet with deadly precision. The skies above Okinawa become a battlefield in themselves, as American planes engage the kamikaze bombers while trying to support the ground forces. On the ground, the Marines and soldiers fight on, day after day, with little respite. The island is a cauldron of destruction, filled with the sound of constant gunfire, explosions, and the screams of the wounded. Casualties mount on both sides, but the American forces push forward relentlessly, knowing that the capture of Okinawa is vital to the war effort. By the end of May, after weeks of grueling combat, the Americans finally make significant advances, pushing the Japanese defenders back and securing critical positions. But the cost is staggering. Over 12,000 Americans are killed, with another 38,000 wounded. The Japanese losses are even greater. Nearly 110,000 soldiers die in the battle, many choosing to fight to the death rather than surrender. The destruction is absolute, and the civilian population of Okinawa suffers terribly as well. Thousands of Okinawan civilians are caught in the crossfire, with many forced to fight alongside the Japanese soldiers or face death. The battle for Okinawa is the bloodiest of the Pacific War. It serves as a grim preview of what the Allies can expect when they finally invade the Japanese home islands. The resistance is fierce, and the costs are overwhelming. The United States military is faced with the harsh reality that victory over Japan will not come without enormous sacrifice. Yet despite the tremendous losses, the capture of Okinawa is a turning point. The island is secured, and its airfields are soon operational. The Americans now have the resources they need to launch a final assault on Japan. The stage is set for the final showdown. But the toll on both the American forces and the Japanese defenders has been immense. The battle has left a scar on all who fought there, and it becomes evident that the cost of victory is becoming unbearable. As the last of the Japanese defenders are driven from the island, a quiet unease settles over the American forces. The war is far from over, but the looming question remains: what will it take to force Japan to surrender? The decision to end the war. July 1945, Washington, D.C. The battle for Okinawa may have been a decisive victory, but it came at such an unbearable cost that the minds of American leaders are now focused on one question: how can we end this war without further sacrifice? The brutal and bloody nature of the Pacific conflict has shown just how far the Japanese will go to defend their homeland. The kamikaze attacks, the fanatical resistance on Okinawa, the sheer loss of life, all point to the undeniable reality that Japan will not surrender easily. In the war rooms of Washington, D.C., and in the meetings of the Allied leaders, the debate rages over how to force Japan to capitulate. The United States has already demonstrated its military might across the Pacific, but the question remains: what will it take to break the will of the Japanese Empire? At the Trinity test in the deserts of New Mexico, the world's first atomic bomb has just been successfully detonated. The explosion is a terrifying testament to the power the United States now holds, the ability to end the war with a single strike. President Harry S. Truman, who took office after the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt, is faced with the momentous decision of whether to use the bomb on Japan. The decision is not made lightly. Truman and his advisors are well aware of the devastating potential of the atomic bomb. The sheer loss of life it would cause weighs heavily on them. But they also know that the war, if it continues, will result in even more bloodshed. The invasion of Japan, still looming, promises to be the bloodiest of all. General Douglas MacArthur and Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, both of whom have witnessed firsthand the devastation in the Pacific, understand that the cost of an invasion could be catastrophic, potentially resulting in hundreds of thousands of American casualties and even more on the Japanese side. The bomb, with its unprecedented destructive power, is seen by some as a necessary evil, an option that, while terrifying, may be the quickest way to bring the war to an end. However, others question whether the bomb is truly needed. Some argue that Japan is already on the brink of collapse, their economy shattered, their military crippled. The Soviet Union's entry into the war against Japan is also expected to tip the balance. There is a strong moral debate within the government, as well as within the scientific community, about the use of such an inhumane weapon. But in the end, the decision is made. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay, a B-29 bomber piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets, takes off from the island of Tinian. Its payload, a single atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy. The target, the city of Hiroshima, a major military and industrial center in Japan. As the plane reaches the drop zone, Tibbets and his crew release the bomb. It falls for 43 seconds before detonating above the city with an explosion that is felt for miles. The blast is devastating. A fireball consumes the city, with temperatures reaching as high as 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The explosion flattens buildings, ignites fires, and incinerates everything in its path. An estimated 70,000 people are killed instantly, with thousands more dying in the following weeks from radiation sickness and injuries. For the American government, the bomb is a necessary measure to end the war. The military leadership believes that the destruction of Hiroshima will break Japan's resolve, forcing them to surrender. But the devastation caused by the bomb is also a stark reminder of the true cost of war, the unimaginable destruction that can be unleashed when humanity's power surpasses its control. August 9th, 1945, Nagasaki, Japan. Just 3 days after the bombing of Hiroshima, another B-29 bomber, Bockscar, takes to the skies, carrying another atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man. Its target is the city of Nagasaki, another important military hub. The decision to drop the second bomb is made quickly. Japan has not yet surrendered, and American leadership believes that only further devastation will convince them to end the war. The bomb drops, and once again, the world witnesses the unimaginable. The bomb explodes over Nagasaki with a blast that kills an estimated 40,000 people instantly. Like Hiroshima, the survivors of Nagasaki suffer from radiation poisoning, burns, and injuries that will linger for years. The two atomic bombings, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, stand as the deadliest and most controversial actions of the war, but they achieve their goal. On August 15, 1945, just days after the bombing of Nagasaki, Japan announces its unconditional surrender. The war in the Pacific and World War II as a whole is finally over. August 15, 1945, Tokyo, Japan. On the radio, Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender to the Japanese people, marking the end of the most devastating conflict the world has ever known. The Japanese, having suffered indescribable loss, are now forced to face the consequences of their war of aggression. The devastation wrought by the atomic bomb has shattered Japan's resolve. The once proud Japanese military, which had mocked the American fleet and refused to back down, has been forced into submission. The streets of Japan are filled with a strange mix of emotions: relief, grief, and disbelief. For the Japanese people, the war has cost them everything. Tens of millions of lives, entire cities reduced to rubble, and a nation left in ruins. The world, too, is forever scarred by the horrors of the war. Europe is devastated, Asia is in ruins, and the survivors of the conflict must now rebuild, both physically and emotionally. The United States, too, is forever changed. The victory in the Pacific and the successful conclusion of the war come at a monumental cost. The United States has emerged as the world's dominant military power, but it has done so at the expense of its own citizens and soldiers. The memories of Pearl Harbor, the USS Arizona, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and the use of the atomic bomb will forever shape the American psyche. But there is no time for celebration. The war is over, but the scars of the conflict will remain for generations to come. The world has been changed, and the legacy of the Pacific War will live on in the history of the United States, Japan, and the entire globe.